Let's start the conversation. It's Live at 5. Best practices, next practices. Together with AASA and NAESP.
Welcome. I'm Gail Pletnick from AASA, and our co-moderator is
Eric Cardwell.
And we will be moderating your Live at 5 session, which is an AASA and NAESP collaboration to connect and support our members from across the country. So we're just going to begin with a little housekeeping. You will be muted by our Zoom host, but we really encourage you to participate by opening up that chat box and submitting any questions you have or comments. The moderators, that would be Eric and I, will be posing any questions we receive to the panel, and we're going to be addressing those in the order that we receive them. This event is being recorded. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Eric, and Eric will be introducing our panelists.
Yes, thank you, Gail. I would like to introduce Dr. Melissa Sandor, Superintendent of Starfield Elementary School District in Sandfield, Arizona. Also, a big welcome to Dr. Jack Dale, retired Superintendent, Fairfax County Schools in Fairfax County, Virginia. We'd also like to welcome Deb Kerr, Superintendent of School District of Brown Deer, Wisconsin. And we have two folks on our panel this evening from Wisconsin, so greetings to our Badger friends. Edgardo Castro, Principal, Lincoln Elementary School in Gallup, New Mexico. And Dr. James Edmond, Principal, Woodside Elementary in Sussex, Wisconsin. Thank you.
Okay, and now we are going to turn to what you're all here for, and that is you ask and we answer. We have asked people if they had something to, some question to submit in advance to please do so. So we do have a few questions that we have already received, but again, we encourage anyone with a question to please submit that via the chat box, and our panelists would be more than happy to try to address those. And again, as a participant, if you have some suggestions, we ask you to drop those in too, and we'll be sharing that with our group. We are going to begin with two questions that were submitted in advance. And Eric, would you like to pose that first question?
Absolutely, Gail. Thank you. Gail, could you give the first question for us?
Sure.
I'm having some technology issues. I apologize.
Okay, no problem. Technology is a wonderful thing when it works, and when it doesn't, it's a headache. So the first question, panelists. With the impact of COVID-19, what is the biggest challenge facing leaders today in small rural districts, in medium-sized districts, and in large or urban districts? And I should share with our participants that our panel really represents our East Coast, middle country, as well as West Coast, and anything from our smaller rural districts all the way to some of the largest districts. So we really have a wonderful set of experts to respond to this question. So again, what impacts does COVID-19 have and the biggest challenges facing leaders in rural and small, in medium-sized, suburban, and in larger, more urban schools? Who would like to start?
Well, Gail, I can. I am in a rural district in Arizona, and I would say probably when I've been talking with my colleagues, not only in Arizona, but across the country that are in those rural, sometimes remote areas, what we're finding is that the digital divide really has become a stumbling block for our students and their learning, our ability to connect with them as teachers and as administrators. That's something that we've really encountered as a challenge. Rural is not the same everywhere. It is very place-based, and so there are some unique overlays to those challenges around technology, whether it's because there are device issues, not being able to get those devices into the hands of students, or it's the internet connections, broadband not being available, or a combination of both. But I would say that overall, for some of the roles that I'm familiar with and those that are in other states, really it has been that digital divide that's become the problem.
And we should add that Melissa is also the president-elect of the Arizona Rural Schools Association. So thank you for sharing that and really helping us to see it from that broader perspective as well. Anyone else?
I could go.
Okay,
Deb
Deb,
Kerr.
thank you.
Deb Kerr from Brown Deer, Wisconsin, a first-tier suburb of Milwaukee. We're about 1,600 kids, 4K through 12th grade, and we put the urban in suburban as one of the most diverse districts in the state, with 80% students of color and over 50% poverty. And I agree with Melissa. We had to really figure out how could we pivot and make sure that our students not only had the meals that they needed to take care of their just basic living situations, but how are we going to get those technology devices in the hands of all our kids, because we were not a one-to-one district. We had to pull all the Chromebooks off the carts, and then we partnered with a local UPS business to get those shipped out to all of our kids. But it took some time to get that organized and a process that we could make sure that we were getting the kids and the parents what they needed. So in our situation, we closed on March 13th before the president or the governor of our state decided to close, because our health department worked very closely with our area superintendents to do that in the context of COVID-19. Because African Americans are predominantly a disposition to get COVID-19, we had significant issues with that. So we needed to act quickly, but also figure out what our teachers needed in terms of the tools. So what we learned was that our teachers had the technology at home. Some of them needed some of the devices to support their teaching, but in order to make sure we were giving the kids and families what they needed, we had to quickly do a survey, figure out if they needed hotspots, because just like in the rural areas, we have families that don't have the access. They could have a device, but not the access to the internet, which was required. And so we tried to do a combination of some blended learning with some packets and online work. The other pieces that were important for all of us were trying to figure out how to best support the teachers in this new remote learning, and communicating with our parents to reassure them that we are going to see continued growth of all of our kids, but this is not going to replace the face-to-face instruction that we always expect in a high-quality learning environment. And so we also learned that parents that had multiple children, it was difficult to navigate their professional and personal life, as well as the new teaching responsibilities that we were sharing with them.
Thank you, Deb. And I should mention, Deb is president of AASA, so again, has the opportunity to connect with superintendents from across the USA. So thank you for bringing that perspective to us. Jack, what do you think our larger schools are facing?
How's
there we
that
go.
Better?
That works, yeah.
I know, even though I retired from Fairfax, still following a lot of the problems that have occurred in a very large system. Fairfax is about 180,000 plus kids. And I'll jump over into the whole technology side and people breaking in and sabotaging the Blackboard's sessions that were in place, and they had to shut it down for a while and then switch over to different platforms. So the whole, even though they thought they were prepared, and we had done some work during previous epidemics of doing some online work, at the time we were trying to all shift over, it was just overwhelming in the system, and so I had to completely regroup and then start it up a couple of weeks later. So that's an immediate challenge right there. And right now, then the issue that people are dealing with is how to begin to think about reopening in the fall, which is a whole nother set of logistical issues.
And although Jack is retired, he is repurposed. He is a mentor in programs for ASA, so we appreciate that. And you know, I think what we're hearing across the board is we've always had issues of equity, but COVID-19 has just pushed all of those things to the forefront, and now we're having to deal with them at a pace and a rate that we never anticipated. And certainly, the concerns with technology and access are one of those pieces.
The digital divide is absolutely huge. I live in a rural part of northern Michigan, Melissa, so and Deb, I feel we see that now, and really what we need is an initiative, much like the interstate back in the 50s, to make sure that we take away this one example of inequity that exists across the United States,
Absolutely.
to ensure, one of the things that we may have brought up at a previous session was just thinking outside of the box. Some communities have utilized off-duty police cars and strategically position them throughout the community so there would be enough Wi-Fi access for the students to be able to connect to do the coursework. So I think we know what our work is ahead of us and moving forward, and hopefully we have the political might that we can push this issue forward and really leveling the playing field for all communities.
So Edgardo, I know that you have some unique challenges in New Mexico. You want to share again, kind of addressing what those are?
Yes, sure. Thank you, Gail. And just like what Melissa and Deb, including Jack, it's the issue about equity and access. And of course, the technology will come into that, and communication, because our district, Gallup, New Mexico, is so widespread and about 5,000 miles. And so it's just so hard to also communicate that in one platform, but we're trying our best. I think every day we learn so much from this pandemic. And the other thing that I would like to stress as well is the cell towers here in Gallup. When you go to Blue Water, you don't have any signal at all. So that's another thing that is a biggest challenge here in our community, which is a medium-sized suburb, really to rural areas because of the geographic area that we have here in Gallup.
Great. And James, so Deb shared a little bit about what she's experiencing from her view in Wisconsin. How about for you?
I think I'll just take a little bit of a different slant on it, in that I will say, and I'm sure all of us would agree, human connection, just that ability to be with students, to be with colleagues, to be with parents on a daily basis, doing what we love while we got into the profession of education. That has probably been the biggest challenge. Initially, obviously, there was a ton of some excitement, positive, some fear around all of this, but people had their heads, down, working hard, students, families as well. But after a while, you start to realize, like some of you have said, that this is not school. This is not how we envisioned it happening. And it may work for some students and it may work for some staff, but the majority of people want to be together. They want to be in front of kids teaching. Kids want to be in front of us learning. Parents want to send their kids to us on a daily basis, and that's not happening. So that loss of human connection, I think, is continuing to wear on people, and there's great hope for at least partial connection in the fall when we come back together. But I think that loss of human connection has definitely been hard on my staff at Woodside Elementary School, and I'm sure everybody else's as well.
Great point. So we talk about the digital divide, but we have a human divide and we have an emotional divide now too. That separation and providing those kinds of emotional supports and social supports for our students.
And Gail, if I could just follow up on what James is saying, one of the things that has also been a challenge for us is connecting with all of our families. There have been students a handful of students for us, that we just were not able to connect with at all during the whole 2 months that we were out of school. And so that's been something that has been troubling and has presented a challenge. How do I connect all of my students to the school in some way?
And so we heard our previous webinar, that was something that came up from one of the principal panelists about the concerns because they're not able to check in with every child or with every family, some of which they know are folks that really will need those additional supports, yet they have no way to make the contact. Anyone else?
This is Deb again, and I so appreciate, Eduardo, what you talk about in terms of the communication piece, because we all know as school leaders how important communication is at all times, but now during COVID-19, it's really exemplified the need to have more of that personal connection. So I'm really glad you brought up the idea about communication, because what we were learning was that some kids were being called by their teacher, their special education teacher or their caseload manager. The kids who were at risk were getting calls, but we were learning that not all kids and all families were being connected with with a phone call or a Zoom conference call. So we implemented Operation Family Check-in, kind of like a rounding to check in with parents. How are things going? Are you doing okay? What's working well for you? What's not? And then what can we do to support you and your family? And so what we learned was that some of our families were caregivers in hospitals, and they were just so stressed out with the whole idea of serving others during the day and then trying to help support their children at home. And so that ongoing communication was really critical. As a district, we tried to be more consistent because, you know, teachers were giving information, emails, and, you know, the inboxes were just filling up. So I did a weekly superintendent call. So every Friday, my parents knew that they were getting a call from me as the superintendent or somebody from my district leadership team to stay connected and to give and to kind of foreshadow what's happening next and give them support and motivation about saying, thank you so much for everything that you're doing. It's enough. You're doing the best you can. We're doing the best we can. And so I think that's really critical during any kind of crisis, but more importantly, with this one, because there was no superintendent playbook or principal playbook developed for COVID-19, right?
Yeah.
And so we're all writing it as we speak.
And I think you just talked about the key, Deb, though, relationship, making those connections. Thank you all. So Eric, you want to do question number 2?
Yeah, absolutely. So looking forward to reopening schools, because now we're turning that page. What is the biggest challenge facing leaders today in small rural schools, school districts, in medium or suburban school districts, and large or urban school districts?
I can go ahead and start as the representative from the rural area. There's a lot of decisions that have to be made, and I'm sure that as you're all working on those reentry plans, they're so complex and there's so many layers to, I mean, just thinking about the logistics of everything, as well as your budget and your personnel and your recruitment and retention plan and your student learning plan. But I would say really the number one question that the superintendents that I'm working with in the rural areas have are, how do we logistically get kids to school? In our rural areas, we often have transportation routes that are up to an hour, 2 hours long. There's no way to double route that. So then what do? Do you have an A day and a B day? Because we know the CDC guidelines are pretty stringent around how many students you can have on a bus when you're trying to social distance them. And so for our rurals, it's really been a challenge to try to think about, once I get them here, I can put them in different classrooms, I can run a different staggered schedule, but it's getting them here. And so that's been a challenge. And I think the other thing for rurals is the impact of not having students show up, and that ADM that's going to impact a budget in a rural district is going to be a much bigger hit, with fewer students not showing up than a larger area might be able to absorb. So a lot of the concerns are around, how do I budget, not how many students are going to show up when we reopen our doors.
Well, and Melissa, all of these items are all predicated upon the funding issue, which is very problematic, not just for schools, but for state governments, down to the locals. And with the social distancing that the CDC is recommending, even if you did have enough time to get all the kids to school, it's still a financial issue of, if you can do double bus runs, getting the kids to school. So I don't know if anybody really has the magic answer for that one quite yet.
No, I don't. If someone does, please let us know. If they are and steal the answer, that'd be great.
We'll put it in the playbook.
Yeah, Melissa, I'm waiting for my crystal ball. As soon as I get it from Amazon, then I'll make sure I get that. I'll ask that as the first question.
Would anybody else like to throw in their thoughts about looking forward to reopening?
I would like to just share, Eric and Gail, about the, social emotional being of our kids. Again, that human connections, how would a 3-year-old or 4-year-old react if you will say, please don't touch her or don't hug me? Where in fact, that's the really, as a teacher and as a school principal, Eric mentioned this, the high five when students come out in the bus. So things like that for reopening is, I think, the biggest challenge. The COVID slide, which is the academic struggle that we have to think outside the box, really how to really not only social and emotional, but again, the academic side. I would think that we put more emphasis to the social emotional well-being first than the academics. Yeah, it's going to be a transformative learning as a principal. Hopefully someone can put that as a handbook or playbook for principals pandemic, including superintendent's handbook or, yeah.
I think we're going to have a lot of great lessons that we learn. And so although we haven't captured all of it yet, I think that is going to be the other challenge for all of us as leaders, school leaders and district leaders. How do we use all of these lessons and really redefine, redesign, and reimagine school? Because that will be the key to this.
And I think the critical component, going back to what Deb had mentioned earlier, is that constant communication with the parents as plans are rolled out, keeping everybody in the loop, and also providing that opportunity for collaboration so all stakeholders feel that they're a part of whatever decision is ultimately made, because nobody wants to be not knowing. I know as a parent with a wife that has a compromised immune system, we're concerned about our 15-year-old son going back as a junior in high school. And you know, there's a lot of other people that have those questions as well. So communication is key. Thanks, Deb, for that piece.
Well, that leads us into a question that was submitted. So I'm just going to jump to that because that is an excellent question. So at a webinar earlier today, I know AASA had a webinar, and the superintendent of Phoenix Union High School said his surveys showed at least 20% of families do not plan to send their children back to school in August and intend to use the district's virtual learning platform for their children, one of 3 or 4 options they are now offering. Are other districts intending to give families a range of instructional options as they come? And are you hearing anything in your community about what you might have to plan forward for in terms of people physically returning to school? Anybody want to jump in?
I could go ahead, Gail. This is Deb.
Okay, Deb.
The challenges we're all facing is how do we open safely? How do we mitigate risk for all of our kids, all of our staff? We also have teachers who are taking care of children at home. And what if the districts that their children go to doesn't match the schedule that the Brown Deer School District has set up to organize? So it's very complex. And as Melissa said, there's many hundreds of iterations. If you even think about, okay, we're going to continue this virtual learning, but we need to do it better. Okay, when you talk about redesign and reform, we need to look at the quality learning standards for virtual learning and make sure that our teachers have the tools to do it right. I mean, our teachers have, I think, gained a profound appreciation across the country for all the work that they were able to do in a very short period of time. But we're not going to get that second chance, sort of say. So we're going to have to be ready to do the virtual learning and do it better, and make sure that there's deeper learning going on with our kids. But also because we're a hotspot in Milwaukee County and north suburb of Milwaukee, we are going to give parents a chance, because we don't want parents to feel like their child's not going to be safe at school. So we're going to use those teachers who are compromised, who can't teach in the classroom, to help us serve those kids who can't who are afraid to come to school. So we're trying to navigate that and make sure we have enough teachers to handle the blended learning or online learning, as well as the face-to-face. But as Melissa said, we're not going to be able to educate all the kids at once. The CDC plans aren't even into the second phase in Wisconsin and Brown Deer. The Supreme Court just overruled the governor's rule. So there's just a lot of polarization. But one thing we know for sure, there's other countries across the world that are doing this and doing this well. Sweden never closed their schools. Finland and Denmark and some of those other countries have reopened their schools, Germany. So we can learn from them, but we might have to take education to our kids. So like in Melissa's situation in the rural schools, Wi-Fi buses might need to go to certain places and communities to make sure those kids can continue to learn.
Great points. Good points, Deb.
Deb, I got a question, kind of a follow-up on that. So then when you're trying to figure out, it's more of a staffing issue. When are you already getting some commitment from parents as far as numbers of that want like a virtual or an alternative avenue of education? Are you already kind of wrapping staffing numbers around and trying to figure that all out? Because when you bring that up, it sounds great, but my head starts to explode trying to think logistically as a principal.
Exactly. And so our first survey of parents, so we did a survey of parents and also those family check-ins. We're getting some other anecdotal evidence of things that went well for parents. But we're going to have to do another survey in July or follow up with our parents to find out, are you willing to send your child to our school under this scenario, under this health and safety expectations and protocols? And so that's the dilemma we're in. So our insurance company, our liability company has given us permission to allow kids to come back with the certain CDC protocols. But if we're not allowed to gather in groups of more than 50, we have to have kids eat in their classroom. We can't allow parents to come into the building at all. And we're going to have to reduce those class sizes somehow. And so just like we're in a rural district, we might have to send the education to where the kids are. And some of our special education teachers are doing just that.
Thank you for that.
Anybody else? Are there certain things that right now you're looking at or planning that really will help address some of these challenges that we're going to be facing as we reopen in whatever format? We don't know if it'll be in person. We don't know if we're going to still have to do virtual. So anything that you're looking at right now, I'm sure staffing is one of the biggest challenges for sure, but what else?
Gail, this is Jack. I would want to say all the things that people are wrestling with a multitude of variables are spot on. That I want to throw in another compounding issue, and that is I think whatever you start with, whether it be in August or September, has got to be almost like baby steps to get people comfortable operating within whatever given framework. And then it's going to be over time, we have to have the ability to change that too, and respond to parents' fears, staffing fears, kids feeling safe, staff feeling safe, curriculum being modified. So I think there's this whole other variable that whatever we think about now is not going to be what we're thinking about in October, November.
That's very true. Yeah. And really, when we think about it, what we thought was going to happen when this all began in February changed dramatically in March, which then became very different in April, May, June. So every month is really a target we're trying to shoot at, and it keeps moving. So good point, Jack. Good point. Anyone else want to add to that one?
Gail, this is Melissa, and I would just follow up. One of the things that we're struggling with, especially in the rural areas, is trying to get access to some of those supplies that we need in order to safely reopen. Hand sanitizer, thermometers, I mean, just the wipes to wipe down desks or doorknobs. Those are things that are on back order. And then you get into the devices and the hotspots, those are 3 months out. So trying to get things so that we can say we have addressed these issues around safety and here's our protocol, but then not having those supplies or the PPE that's necessary in order to ensure everyone's safe and healthy while they're here has been a real challenge as well. And so I don't know the answer to that. I just know that that's something that we're struggling with.
That's fascinating, Melissa. The back order hadn't even crossed my mind. Have they given you guys any indication as far as when the items might be arriving?
Well, if it's a hotspot, it's 12 weeks out. And so, we've got them ordered and maybe we'll get them before we are intended to start school. We'll see. And as far as our hand sanitizer, couple of weeks, 3 to 4 weeks for our PPE. So it kind of depends on what it is that you've ordered as far as how quickly you're going to get it.
It's interesting, Gail, the curve of the discussion each week just tends to move in different areas, and that's the beauty of the Live at 5.
Absolutely, Eric, absolutely. And what has been great is that we see it evolving. You know, the discussion really does, even if we have the same topics, it keeps evolving as we get new information or as we see new opportunities or challenges along the way. So it's been a great opportunity. So Eric, I think you're next, aren't you? Or is it me? Is it back to me?
No, I think it's me actually.
Oh, okay.
And my technology is working, so I'm good.
Great.
And you know, I imagine probably your subconscious, everybody's subconscious about 3 a.m. is trying to solve all of these problems. You know, at least I would wake up at 3 a.m. thinking about things. So kind of going in line, we talked about the students not returning. I guess I kind of want to drill down on thoughts and regarding staff, because we have the kids show up, we need to have staff in place. And I was, USA Today did a poll, and I just read this today. It revealed that 1 in 5 teachers are unlikely to return to the classroom, with teachers 55 and older saying they're almost that they probably won't return. Approximately 50%, I believe, bringing a potential wave of retirements, resignations to districts across the state. What are your thoughts in regarding about how to retain staff with COVID in mind? And, you know, and obviously those during that polling time there, it's so fresh right now. Some of those people might come back based upon what districts do, but what can we do about staffing? Because there is already kind of a fire out there as far as the shortage on the teachers across our nation. What can we do?
I can start. I think involving them in the discussions around reentry planning is huge. And what is it going to take for us to provide you as a staff member in order for you to feel comfortable and safe coming back to work? And what can we do if you don't feel comfortable and safe in order to reconnect you to the teaching and learning that's happening? And how can we re-envision your position, your job, so that you're still able to be a contributing member of the school community? And so I think it starts with communication and over-communicating and communicating often so that they have an understanding of what you're planning and why, and have an opportunity to provide that input that might ease their anxiety and might make them more comfortable about coming back.
No, I couldn't agree more, Melissa. When you think about it, one of the really difficult things of this crisis is the unknown. People just don't know what to expect. So I think it's so critical to communicate, involve people in the discussions and also in the solutions. You know, those are the folks that will be in those classrooms, so contributing to that. But I think the other piece that we've all learned is being honest about saying, I don't know the answer, or right now that isn't something that, you know, we can address, but we'll work on that together. Because I think that level of transparency and building that trust is going to be critical as we open our doors.
Transparency is huge.
Yep.
And collaboration. Anybody else like to add anything?
Sure. I think this is Deb again. I think it's also important to realize, just like in equity, you recognize where the kids are. Well, you need to recognize where your teachers are in all of this change and ambiguity and all the unknowns. And so with our weekly, with messages to our parents, I always included the teachers, even though it was to the parents, so that they could just understand what I'm talking to the parents about, because I'm in a smaller district and I'm part of HR and communications. So I'm sure Melissa and her group can relate to that. We all do a little bit of everything. And then also getting back to what Eduardo said about the SEL. So during Teacher Appreciation Week, we weren't in school. So we sent all the teachers gratitude journals and a nice letter saying, We appreciate you. We love you. We care for you. You're doing amazing work. Be satisfied with what you're doing because that's the best you can do right now. So giving them extra special things to keep them motivated. I've been doing Deb on the Deck Zoom meetings. So at 5 o'clock or 4 o'clock, bring the Corona Tina or Teeny to the deck meeting or your beverage of choice, and just letting teachers know that they're supported and kind of giving them the information. Oh, we've been meeting on reentry planning the last week. Here are some of the things we've talked about. You know, we see there's the 3 scenarios, you know, the virtual learning, the blended, and then the face-to-face, but we're still working on this. Nothing's been decided. Working collaboratively with your teachers union, whether you have a strong union or not, it doesn't matter. The communication will get you great benefits in the long term because you're involving them in the process and letting them know that they're going to be part of moving the district forward. But you're so right, Gail. We don't know what's happening next because every day something else is changing.
And Deb, I think your point about, you know, all stakeholders, but, you know, now we used to say involve the students in the decisions and the parents and the staff and the community. Now we have to say involve and address the whole child, the whole parent, the whole staff, because there's so many needs that need to be addressed. So it just isn't about the school as we used to define it or the district as we used to define it. Now it has so many different layers that have really come out because we've peeled away the layers of that onion, and there's a lot that we're finding in there, especially around social emotional basic needs, just basic needs within our community. So it's really going to be critical to communicate and to be transparent and build that trust and make sure you're addressing all of the needs, not just the academic needs or not just the, you know, we talk about safety. Well, safety has a much broader definition now because now we're talking about those health concerns and the safety of all individuals. Like you said, Eric, you know, your son might be fine, but if he comes home and unfortunately that has contact with someone, then your wife is at risk. So it's a much different world out there. Anyone else?
Gail, this is Jack. I think I would reinforces the need to do this slowly to let people become more accustomed to kind of what the new normal is, but it's going to be a phased in normal. As I look at the staffing issues, I can see running, let's say, 25% of the kids on a daily basis. And then on the 5th day, you can reinforce or use the distance learning platforms. But even then, that might help with some of your workload between teachers. You could have teachers share loads of classrooms, so you have a smaller number of kids, but then also recognize some staff may not wish to be there full-time yet. Maybe they can do half-time because of their own childcare needs or just their comfort level. Same thing goes with food service staff, custodial staff, clerical staff, et cetera, throughout the rest of the building. And so kind of a gradual phase-in of things until we all become comfortable and rebuild our trust in the system and one another and our ability to fight the virus.
And, you know, that's another challenge that I know we're all going to be faced with. Right now, we really don't know what percentage of parents will opt to keep their children home, and for very good reasons. But if we can't open our schools, what impact does that have on the economy and people who are having to return to work and do that, actually show up physically? So how is that going to impact all of this as well? So some interesting issues that are coming up. Okay, I have another question that came in. So we know school will have to look different in many ways next year. What about co-curricular and extracurricular activities? What do you expect, or maybe the right words are, what do you predict for the changes in those areas? Who would like to jump in?
Oh, well, I giggle. I giggle a little bit. This is James in Wisconsin because if you watch sports at all, and I'm sure most people pay attention to it, right? I think sports have become a great distraction just in general before COVID, after COVID. People can sit down mindlessly and watch a game and forget about things that are troubling them. I'm sure it's the same with Netflix and you name it, any other type of thing. But I've read some really good articles about how sports, there's so much that can be learned through the camaraderie of being in a sport or in a play or a musical, those types of things. and how not having those things for children can really have a negative mental impact on their development. So those are some of the conversations that we've had as well. Beyond the academic side is, you know, what is really feasible? What are sports? I think there's a lot going on in the CDC too, and different national organizations out there about how can you make these extracurricular activities accessible to kids, just like a classroom, in smaller chunks. You know, are there ways to put on a concert, to have a sporting event where the kids can still get the activity, maybe without the spectators, but still have the opportunity to bond that way and connect and learn in that way. And I know here in Wisconsin, I have a couple of sons who play high school football, and the word that just came out from the WIAA, or at least somebody who works for them, is that they're fully expecting that come the first week of August, that kids will begin football practice in anticipation of a football season in the fall. And you've seen that with a number of other sporting teams as well. So it's interesting how there's concessions made for certain aspects of what we do or society, and others don't have that type of concession, but we're hearing like some of those things will be a reality, and kids will have the opportunity to participate in the fall. So
Anyone else want to take that one on?
This is Melissa. I think one of the things that you mentioned, Gail, is addressing the whole child. And if we really are adhering to that tenet of embracing that kind of environment for our students, it's short-sighted to not figure out a way to make sure that we are offering those things like sports, like art, like music, and providing in a safe way, as safe as we can make it, a safe way for them to engage in those kinds of opportunities within the day. And I, you know, like James was saying, I don't know what safe looks like. I mean, my gosh, you've got a bunch of football players running around. Are they sharing water bottles? Do you give them each a ball? What do you do about people that want to watch? So there's a lot of complexities around just even a football game. So let alone practice. So I don't know what it should look like. As far as the philosophy though of whole child, we really want to be pointed about how we think about offering those opportunities to our students and continuing to make sure that school is a place where they can learn and grow and become the person that they're meant to be.
Yeah, and I think about the contact sports, and there just doesn't seem to be any easy way to address some of the issues that you'll have in trying to put those things back in place. And the other thing, I have a grandson who's been in community theater for a while, and this year, of course, he gets a lead in the play. All of this breaks loose. But the director wanted to keep things going, so they're trying to figure out how they use green screens, and each child will do a piece of that. But I have to tell you, it went from something he really enjoyed doing, and every Friday night, 3 hours, he'd be there. But I think that camaraderie and being with those friends was such a huge piece. And now all the stress of trying to figure out how you do this in front of the screen and doing it all alone has truly taken the joy out of something that he loved so much. So I think that's the other thing as we make these transitions. Yes, we may be able to offer it, but we have to realize it's going to have a different impact depending on, you know, what that child's personality is and whether or not that now adds a new layer of stress rather than reducing their stress. So it's going to be interesting moving forward with all of those things. Anybody else want to jump in on that one?
We're looking towards partnering with our local YMCAs, Boys and Girls Clubs, to help us with some of those other activities, to do it in a safe manner, our Park and Recreation Department. Right now, our tennis courts are open, but there's every other court has a net. So to kind of keep the social distancing and reducing the gathering, our track is open. People, we can't monitor it all the time to make sure people are following the rules, but at least people are getting out there and doing something. Our playgrounds are still closed, so that's heartbreaking for a lot of families. We don't have the protocols in place to disinfect the playgrounds, but I'm hoping that things will start to open up a little bit more this next month, and we're just going to have to wait and see what works the best to allow these kinds of activities to happen safely. James might know this too, but Little League is already playing in Wisconsin. I watched a girls' fast pitch softball game the other day, but I know the youth leagues are really trying to get out there and get something going.
Yes, they are.
Okay. Anyone else have a final word on this question before we move to the next one? Okay, Eric, I'm lost again. Whose turn is it for the question, yours or mine?
It's because of the rich conversation that's going
I
on.
know.
We're just being pulled in. It's actually mine, Gail, and I'm going to pull
Okay.
a question that was asked last week, but we did, in case the viewer is on tonight, it'll be answered. And they're asking, should principals and APs across the country be trained in a different manner in looking at the future landscape? And I think it's in regard to, obviously, the COVID situation. How could we train, maybe just not principals, but educators in general, in a different avenue to maybe better prepare them for a potential second wave, third wave, or heaven forbid, something new, because maybe something will be coming around the corner.
Well, is there anybody that wasn't training their staff in some way when we all had to move and pivot to a different kind of learning platform? And I think that's something that I'm taking to heart in my planning for professional development in this upcoming year, with not just my teachers and principals, but with my students and with the other members of our school community. There are some things that we've got to do different, or we've got to be able to turn to in order to be effective and efficient in providing and continuing to provide an effective learning platform. So I would say the simple answer is yes. And I think that the needs of the school community would determine what kinds of professional developments are needed. An AOI, an online school community, is not going to need the same kinds of professional development supports that my rural district in Arizona, where we do have one-to-one available at school, but they can't take it home because there's nothing to connect to. So how do they do learning differently in that kind of environment? So very needs-driven, very place-driven, I think, for professional development.
I think the old adage of, we've got to focus on learning, not the time aspect of educating our kids. I think there are some silver linings that we have learned through this remote learning or virtual learning format. Some kids have flourished, but like Gail talked about her grandson, some have not, and almost disconnected because it was just too stressful. So I think what we have to do is take what works well and personalize it for all kids. Students need voice and choice and to develop their student agency. And I think teachers aren't used to doing that all the time. They're used to being the one in charge instead of the guide on the side and facilitating learning instead of just directing it all. And so I think it helps us to ask the questions, does high school have to be 4 years anymore? Can kids now attain credits in 2 or 3 years and go to take college courses or other kinds of trainings to fulfill whatever their passions are in a future career? But I think that the virtual learning format has made us reflect upon the need to do more to personalize the individual student that we're working with, taking them where they are and then taking them to the next level, but it looks different for every kind of student. So it might mean that not only one teacher is in charge of a classroom or a group of kids. There might be a cohort that works with a lot of different teachers, depending on what their expertise and license.
So Deb may remember when I was president in 2017, I really focused on redefine, redesign, and reimagine, and personalization was just what I felt was the way to address equity issues when I came into my district. That's what I found, that just what you said, we really need to know each child and we have to address their needs and build on their strengths. And I think personalization allows us to do that. So I think we have an opportunity here. We have a crisis that now is making us really focus on things like equity, that are really making us focus on the needs of the whole child, that really make us think about, well, how do we redefine and redesign to meet the needs? So I think we have a golden opportunity in a very dark cloud. So there is the silver lining, and how are we going to take that and run with it now? And I think that's really going to define public education and public educators. We always have wanted to do the right thing. Are we now going to take this really horrible experience for our country and for our world, and say, but there's something good that we can bring from that and have that blossom and grow. And I really think that can happen and will happen. So I also co-chair the AASA Personalized Learning Cohort. And what we heard from our members is for instance, within 48 hours, they were able to be up, they pivoted, and they had all their kids online and learning. And they're really assessing the quality of that. So is it easy? Of course not. Is it something we should be doing? Yes. And now it may have gotten to the point where, and it's something we must do. And so that, again, might be the opportunity that we all have. Guess what, Eric? The magic time is here for the rapid fire. So I can introduce that. So what we try to do is end every one of our sessions on a positive note. Not that this wasn't a positive conversation. You were all wonderful, sharing a lot of great ideas, having good conversation. But we like to end it with something really focused completely on positive. So Eric, would you like to introduce what we'll be doing?
Absolutely. So the way we'll end tonight, after when we're done, we'll have a couple announcements, but a quick fire round, something positive that has happened locally, statewide, nationally, or we've had people as far as Pakistan tuning in to these webinars. So it can be internationally. So, you know, the gloves are off. You can choose whatever you want, and just something to share, about 30 seconds. So I'm going to do the Brady box, the Brady Bunch box, and Melissa, you're right underneath me. Could you go first, please?
You bet. I would say that the silver lining for us has been the connections that we've made to our community. There have never been the opportunities that we've had in the last 2 months to connect with our families in a really meaningful way. And I think that those connections are going to be something we can move forward with and leverage in the upcoming months so that we can keep that positivity going. And that support of our school community has just been amazing. So I would say that's my positive shining star right now.
Just when you thought that those relationships were already strong, and they've just strengthened so much more.
Absolutely.
During this, that silver lining that you speak of. Okay, yep. Deb, you're next in that Brady Bunch list.
Okay, well, it's been great to be with all of you tonight. It's been great to meet all of you, so thank you. Well, I'm going to just reflect on recent events. It's really impacted our Brown Deer community as well as others across the country, and remind people we rise by lifting others, and that we've got to take action when there are racial inequities going on in our communities. And we as educators need to make a statement, because we cannot be silent on these things that matter to all children. Black lives matter, but all lives matter. And so I'm really proud of our Brown Deer community who has come together, and at 5 o'clock tonight, they're doing a kneel down in the community, and the kids have helped orchestrate that in a peaceful way. And I'm really proud of them, because if anything, our kids need to be advocates for what they believe in, and what they believe in is right. So continue the great work that you are all doing. Thank you.
Thanks, Deb. Thanks for rallying the community in your neck of the woods. Jack, you're next on the list.
Yeah, I'm going to do one that I've noticed here in my own community. The theme is the parents have really stepped up to support their own children and the children of other children in their classes. And an example here is parents have personalized a yard sign for every one of the graduating seniors in our neighborhood. And it's an example of the kind of things that when your community actually comes together, recognize the need to connect and support one another. Powerful stories.
Bringing folks closer together. Edgardo, my friend from New Mexico.
Oh, thank you, Eric, and thank you, Deb, for stating that all lives matter. I appreciate that. And on a local level here in Gallup, New Mexico, I am incredibly proud of all cafeteria workers, including our bus drivers, taking our summer food program. We started yesterday, Monday, June 1st. And so thanks a million to our cafeteria workers and bus drivers. Kudos to them.
Thank you, Edgardo. James.
Yeah, I'm just going to follow on Deb's coattails real quickly here. And, you know, at a time now more than ever, our roles in education and educating our students about more than academics is crucial. Equality, empathy, love for all truly matters. We have this saying at Woodside where every child, every day, the Woodside way. And I spoke to my staff today, and I just let them know that, you know, that means something. And it has no color, it has no ethnicity, it has no religion attached to it, it has no sexual orientation requirements. Every child deserves to feel welcome, feel safe, feel loved, feel equal. And I believe all of us together, we can make positive change, whether we're talking COVID and learning or we're talking societal issues together. We can do this. I believe in all of you, and let's try to believe in each other.
And I just want to say thank you to all of our panelists for leading with heart, courage, and love for not just the kids, staff, community, and one another. I mean, that's the beauty of AASA, NASP, belonging to the associations. You're connected from coast to coast and providing solutions here today, because truly we are in this together. And when this issue goes, there will be another issue, and collectively we can draw off of one another. And like I said, lead with courage. So Gail, I guess we're going to do this again for the month of June. If folks are interested in participating in the discussion, make sure you get on the website and or on Twitter, and be sure to give us ideas, questions in advance. We'll make sure that those get on every Tuesday. We're live at 5. So my friend in Arizona, would you like to say some last words and then the advertisement piece?
Sure. You know what? Leadership matters, and our voices matter. And to all of our panelists and those that are participating, educators across the U.S., you are setting the example. And so our future is brighter and better because of you. So thank you all for what you do and for sharing and making a difference in our communities. Thank you so much. And now on to the commercial. AASA and NAESP have another collaboration outside of Live at 5, and that is our National Aspiring Principals Academy. We just concluded one, had a group of incredible leaders, and they are very early career and or aspiring, and they are really the future for public education. So we invite anyone who knows someone who is an aspiring leader, or who may be very early in their career as a principal, to join cohort number 2. And you'll get more information by looking at the NAESP website. Eric, you get the final word.
You know, tune in next week. We're excited. Thanks for the wonderful conversation, everybody. Like I said earlier, it goes in different areas each week. But thank you for the thoughtfulness, and together, best next, together, we will get through this. Have a great evening, everybody.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.